Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the Geelang Anger 85X HD. HD recording and FPV view provided by the Caddx Baby Turtle. This is the SD card right here, this is where recording is. Powered by 1202 6900 kV motors. I see the website's listing 8700 kV. Not sure why. On those motors are the Gemfan 2030 tri-bladed props. The all-in-one F4 flight controller also features a 5-amp 4-in-1 ESC. The VTX mounted in the canopy is power switchable up to 200 milliwatts. It comes with several different receiver options. I have the FrSky XM Plus option. It does have a capacitor on your battery lead. It also has a buzzer, programmable multicolored LEDs. Canopy is kind of soft mounted with these 3D printed parts. It comes with a USB cable with an extra long nose, which is needed to get down to the USB port. A sheet with a QR code pointing you to the manual, extra set of props, screwdriver, and an extra rubber band to mount your battery, some foam to mount to the outside of the frame to soften any bumps you might have. It also comes with one 450 milliamp 3S battery and a zip top box with a handle to hold your quad. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting almost 84.5 millimeters. It weighs 59.5 grams. With the included 3S 450 milliamp battery, it weighs 102.75 grams. I did finally get a day where the wind was relatively calm. This is somewhat late in the evening as well, so those things are important to note. I'll show you in this video also a more acrobatic or faster flight in case you get a wild hair. This isn't really made for that sort of thing. This is about getting a shot or getting some footage. It does fly relatively quickly for something of its weight and prop size, but I'm trying to actually fly a little slower and smoother in this video. And for me, one of the things that I think I hear about most often is if you're doing micros and you're wanting high quality footage, you've got a couple options, but one that I hear often about is either going HD or going with digital FPV. There seems to be some middle ground in there for people who like to use Insta360 Go's, which I have featured on the channel several times. But some people just don't like that footage. You know, its frame per second isn't as high quality or as many frames per second as some might want. The image quality, it isn't as good as a GoPro. So I think for those people that might be in one of those groups, you probably have already identified a way you want to go about getting your high definition footage. This for me I think is the easiest because it doesn't include a secondary camera of any sort, and it's also less expensive than going with digital FPV. You have the recording right on the SD card, so your portability should be relatively good. You will need a computer or some way to get the recorded HD footage off the SD card and onto whatever it is that you're wanting to put the SD card onto. I am flying the stock battery, and you'll find that this flight goes for 4 minutes and 40 seconds at kind of a cruisy sort of pace. And I think one of the things that makes this able to get that footage outside of, they have very smooth motors. These Geelang 1202 motors and their 1204s that I've flown have been very smooth bearings. They're not grindy or noisy. They're definitely not notchy. And so that definitely helps with keeping the vibration down in the quad. So if you've got fresh props, you should get some pretty smooth footage. Also, they've done that a little bit of innovation with a 3D part and kind of soft mounting that canopy, which also has a tendency to help. I didn't see it, at the very least, that it caused any sort of problems. I actually flew this in wind a number of times trying to see what sort of footage I would get out of it, and I'm pretty surprised. I can show you that, a little clip of the windy flight as we get towards the end of the flight footage, because I think it's important to show that, you know, my area has typically got some sort of wind, especially this time of year when you've got a seasonal change. It's kind of blowing in the new season, so oftentimes we have winds usually somewhere in the teens and as far as miles per hour goes. This particular day or evening is pretty calm. It's actually about 8 miles per hour. There are some gusts that will bump up from time to time, but being we're in town, we have the protection of the trees, we have the protection of the houses. I don't think this is actually being hit with 8-mile-an-hour winds by any stretch. I think it's much lower than that. But when you get up over the house, you're much more exposed to whatever wind there might be. And a number of areas have wind that is far less than mine. It's relatively calm in some of your areas, and that would make for a much better sort of scenic sort of flight or slow cruisy flight where you're getting HD footage of a scene or an area or an environment. So that's something to keep in mind. I did mention during the quick roll it comes in several different flavors as far as receivers goes. You can get this on Banggood's website, and I'll have a link down in the video description, with a AC900 receiver, which does FrSky as well as FlySky. You can get it with DSMX, DSM2, FlySky, FrSky receivers that are standalone. In my case, I have the XM Plus, and you can also get it with the TBS Crossfire. Now, something I thought was interesting about their listing, it's actually cheapest with the TBS Crossfire than without a receiver. And that doesn't make any sense to me. So I have a little bit of a curiosity that maybe they got the price wrong on the Banggood listing, or there's going to be a change that we'll see in the very near future. As we cruise over the house, you can see the impact of the getting the quad exposed to the wind that I talked previously or earlier in the flight footage. It doesn't necessarily cope with that all that well. It did better than I expected, but these aren't good candidates to fly in wind, that's for certain. You're going to want to be in a very calm environment. And I like this footage as far as the HD recording goes, and I find HD much easier to work with. Of course, the craze is 4K, 8K, but that's just not what we're doing. You see, we've landed, and again, that was a 4-minute and 40-second flight. So this is our faster flight. Again, this isn't what this quad is really designed for, but, you know, got to show you, just in case you happen to be out there and you're getting your scenic flight footage and you got some more battery to burn, you can do it. You'll see I'm getting some wobbles as I really start to hit the throttle hard. Those are coming from the canopy, I believe, moving around. But for the size, shape, and weight, it's still fairly acrobatic. It can get around pretty good. This flight, I get a little bit underpowered near the end, and I hit the dirt or the grass, and we go for a little tumble, so you get to see a little bit of a durability test as well. This flight's only going to be about 2 minutes and 20 seconds long, but again, it does end in a crash rather than the end of the battery. I think you'll probably get about another 15 to maybe 20 seconds, depending upon your pace, flying like this on the typical, again, 3S 450 milliamp battery. Also, it's got a beeper in there, and I think that's something that some of us that have been around for a while, we still want a beeper. My old eyes, sometimes when a micro goes down on the grass, can be a little bit of a challenge to find it, so setting up a switch to do the beeper thing is an advantage, and it's already got that in there. It's within the canopy. I showed you that during the quick roll. It's a standard size beeper, so it is quite loud. Should help you find your quad if you should have one of those instances where you go down and you're not quite certain where it's at and you're not able to visually just see it real easily. It does come pre-tuned. I did not tune it, so you get it just as I did, or presumably, depending upon when you order one. If you choose to order one, you'll get one with the same Betaflight version, the same tune that I do. Of course, Betaflight changes over time, so if you're ordering this, 3 months after I got mine, or 4 months or a year, things will be a little bit different, but you get a baseline, and I fully expect the other versions of Betaflight this might come with to also have a tune on it. Most companies that are assembling or making quads are tuning them nowadays, which is a good thing. There was a time where we'd have to spend all sorts of time tuning ready-to-flies or assembled quads, and we don't generally have to do that too much. And unfortunately, one of the mistakes I see people making oftentimes is changing Betaflight versions right away when they get it. As you can see, I've ended there in a crash, and it's time to move on to the flight in the wind. This is the windy day flight, and you can see in that footage, especially in the top right, you can see those trees really waving around. The miles per hour is somewhere in the high teens and in the 20s as far as the gusts go. So pretty high wind for something like this to be flying around. But I wanted to give it a shot. Plus, I didn't know how many days, or even if I would have any days of calmer days. And this is also a more sunny flight, so it gives you another perspective on the quad and how the camera operates in this sort of lighting condition with these winds. And I was pretty pleasantly surprised, because I have flown this type of thing in winds before, and generally speaking, you get nothing but wobbles. Now, some of you might be looking at this and saying there's all sorts of wobbles. Well, look at the calmer periods. But we have pretty good sections of stable footage where the wind isn't necessarily down, because you should be able to hear it on the audio recording, and the quad is flying along. Now, it's typically going to come when you don't have a crosswind. A crosswind is going to cause quite a bit of problems with these. So when you're flying either straight against the wind or you're flying with the wind, will get you your best footage. But I do want to show this to you, because you might be interested in something like this and you don't have any experience flying things in the wind, so I thought it might be of value to those people. Try to show you as much as I can when it comes to quad reviews. That way, if you do choose to pursue purchasing something, that you have all the information that I can possibly provide for you. And you noticed in the quick roll that I also had some grass stains in my hoops, And that comes from me crashing these things, because I tend to fly things for a period of time rather than doing, a 1 day or 1 afternoon review. I fly them over, say, a week to 10 days, sometimes 2 weeks before I gather up my footage, start to review it, and then start to put together my thoughts on the review process. So it takes me a little bit longer, but it makes me feel more comfortable that I am relaying my experience with the quad over a period of time with you, so you have a better idea of what to expect when you were to acquire something, either this product or another product that might be on the channel that I've reviewed. We've taken a look at about 2 minutes of footage. That should be enough. It's about half of the flight. Again, at this sort of cruisy sort of speed, depending upon your camera angle and your wind and all the other environment variables, you should get somewhere around 4.5 to 5 minutes of flight on the stock battery that it does come with. Let's go back to the desk. We'll take a look at a few finer points, and then we'll wrap up. So I think I failed to mention in the quick roll that it's got a foam pad on here. This is not a sticky foam pad. And then you've got a rubber band. I found it held fine, but for those that want to keep an extra secure battery, I would actually encourage you to replace or pull off, or at the very least add some sort of rubber matted material to this that is going to be more sticky. So you have the sticky of the rubber band as well as the sticky below the battery or the top of the battery, depending upon your perspective of holding that battery in place. I didn't have a problem with this, but going to mention those things to you. Also, we've got motor wires, containment built into the frame so everything stays out of harm's way. The front of it looks like it has mounts like this that were just cut off. I've actually done that to some of my frames, so I suspect the manufacturer is doing that as well. Again, we look at the soft mounting here, and note that, especially if you can look over on this side, that it does come down in contact with screw to screw. I don't expect there to be a problem where it shifts and then comes down and shorts anything, because I just don't think it has that reach. I think they thought through this sort of soft mounting enough to understand that you didn't want a crash coming down to where the bottom part of the screw that secures this bendy part up in here to actually come down on your board and short 2 other components. So I don't think that is going to be an issue. The wire containment looks to be pretty good. The only section I think I would have a little bit of concern about is this section over here, but let's see if we can pull it out a little bit. Well, if we stretch it, there's an outside potential that maybe you get a prop strike, but I'm kind of pulling on that. I think in most circumstances, if you do a visual inspection before takeoff and you're not hung up at a tree, and then you get out of the tree, you're using turtle mode, which I don't recommend. Maybe a bird knocks it or a squirrel knocks it out of the tree for you, and you take right back off. I suppose, some outside chance that you might have that wire sticking out here to where your prop could strike it. But I think in normal circumstances, if you just look at the quad, give it a quick inspection, okay, you can see you're okay to fly and you're safe to go. Again, the SD card over here, I'm kind of stressing that because I've gotten a few questions. Some people have acquired some quads that have onboard HD recordings. I didn't go over that in the video, so we've got a little card tucked away in here. See if I can get it with my fingers. So I've got my little SD card right here, and it goes in that little slot. You can now see that slot is now vacant because I've pulled the card out. We've got spacers to mount the camera inside this canopy. Those spacers do not come with this camera, so hopefully you never have a crash bad enough to where you lose one of those spacers, because you'd have to find... You might be able to use the aeration line for fish tubing, or fish tanks, the tubing that you use for that aeration of the water. That might be something very, very similar in size and shape. We've used that in years gone by for various sorts of soft mounting, so that might be something you can use. Otherwise, you can just take a couple of nuts or anything to create that sort of space you might have. Again, not likely to lose it, but in a worst case scenario, if you just bash the canopy all up and you're trying to put it back together, note those spacers between the camera and the canopy. Antenna placement isn't ideal. For me, if I were to be worried about range, one of the things I would do is I would fish this line back down underneath the frame and have it come out the back. Maybe run a zip tie over this LED and then have the zip tie pointed out, and then heat shrink one of these to that zip tie, so you have upright 90 degrees and then you have flat at 0 degrees. That will give you the best range in the case of a diversity receiver. This is the Gear Anger 85X HD, and there'll be a link in the video descriptions. Otherwise, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.